coffee, play metal, and you're happy. Chris Finlayson, Julie Woods, kia ora. Thank you both. Julie, thanks for your first time here on the panel. I really appreciate it. I am Wallace Chapman. I am back tomorrow, broadcasting from the Bay. See you tomorrow at 3:45. Checkpoint is next.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te rero irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, invisible. That's what 5-year-old torture and murder victim Malachi Subecz was to the agencies meant to protect him. A new report makes 14 recommendations to stop it happening again. So why isn't the government on board with all of them? Children's Minister Kelvin is live. Details of New Zealand's first conviction for sabotage are revealed. Some Sandringham dairy owners are offered silent watch alarms following a fatal stabbing. And a little light in your day and night, some Christmas sparkle makes a comeback on Ponsonby's famous Franklin Road. We'll go there live. You can watch us on Sky, Channel 83 or Freeview, Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. Athletics great Sir Murray Halberg has died at the age of 89. Away from the track, he'll also be remembered for his inspirational work in transforming the lives of children with a disability through sport as the founder of the Halberg Foundation. Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
Sir Murray Halberg won Olympic gold in the 5,000 metres at Rome in 1960 in what became known as New Zealand's golden hour, with the late Sir Peter Snell having won 800 metres gold shortly beforehand. Halberg only got into athletics after suffering a serious shoulder injury playing rugby. That left him with a withered left arm. He became the first New Zealander to run a sub-4-minute mile in 1958, and he also won gold in the 3-mile at the British Empire Games in 1958 and 1962. In 1988, he was knighted for his services to sport, and the National Sports Awards, the Halbergs, are named in his honour. He's survived by his wife, Lady Phyllis, and 3 children and 2 grandchildren.
The family of 5-year-old Malachi Subecz, who was tortured to death by his caregiver a year ago, says the reports released today confirm their belief his death was preventable. Dame Karen Poldassi's review of the 6 agencies involved has found critical gaps in the way they shared information and calls for mandatory reporting of child abuse. Ruth Hill reports.
In a written statement, Malachi's maternal cousin and uncle say there is no doubt he would still be alive if Oranga Tamariki had acted on their concerns. His cousin, who had repeatedly tried to alert the authorities, says Oranga Tamariki didn't listen to what she and others were telling them. Malachi's uncle says Oranga Tamariki has acknowledged that it did not follow its own guidelines, never spoke to Malachi or engaged with whānau. He says Malachi's death cannot be in vain.
Dame Karen Poldassi says Malachi's killer was able to hide her abuse of him because government departments did not share information.
Malachi was failed by the system, and that's why I've identified 5 key gaps that need to be addressed to ensure that we have overlapping safety nets. So I'm looking for overlapping hardwired safety nets so that children don't fall between those.
Dame Karen has made 14 recommendations, including mandatory reporting of suspected child abuse by professionals and others working with children. She says most of these recommendations are not new, with 33 reviews and reports into child abuse and death over the last 30 years. The Children's Minister is defending the decision not to adopt all the recommendations from the report into Malachi Subex's death. Dame Karen Poldassi's report made 14 recommendations, with the government agreeing to adopt 9 and wait for more advice on the remaining 5. Kelvin Davis says something like vetting carers when a sole parent is taken into custody could leave loopholes if not implemented properly.
If you look at the vetting for parents who have gone to prison, sole parents who have gone to prison, we should probably also look at whether or not we look at sole parents who have unexpectedly gone to hospital, sole parents who are maybe in mental health facilities, sole parents who have had to go overseas for work or something unexpectedly.
Kelvin Davis says the government wants to take its time to make sure it gets it right. The judge who sentenced Graham Phillip for sabotaging Transpower infrastructure says due to this being the country's first sabotage crime, finding case law to help was difficult. Justice Tahana today sentenced the 62-year-old to 3 years in prison. The judge says she referred to a case from Canada in deducting time for guilty pleas and Phillip's good character from the sentence starting point of 4.5 years. The maximum for sabotage is 10 years in prison. She didn't order Phillip to pay reparation because he has no assets or savings. It's 5:04. To sport, as you heard in the news, Sir Murray Halberg, who was part of New Zealand's golden hour at the 1960 Rome Olympics, along with the late Sir Peter Snell, has died at the age of 89. Sir Murray died in Auckland yesterday. He won gold in the 5,000 metres shortly after Snell had won gold in the 800 metres, the achievement ushering in a golden age for New Zealand athletics.
Halberg looks over his shoulder as he comes into the straight. Halberg still leading. He's going away now from Grabowski. He's going away and Halberg wins.
Tunisia are celebrating an historic Football World Cup win over France, their former colonial power, but the match has left New Zealand referee Matthew Conga embroiled in controversy. Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
France have filed a complaint with FIFA after the Palmerston North school teacher disallowed Antoine Griezmann's last-minute goal following a video review. Griezmann scored 8 minutes into stoppage time, but the goal was ruled out for offside after Conga consulted the VAR, giving Tunisia a 1-0 win. However, former English Premiership and international referee Mike Dean believes Conga got it wrong.
Probably the longest conversation we've probably had between a VAR and a referee. Don't think it should have been reviewed, and for me it should have been a goal.
Despite the loss, France still topped their group and advanced to the knockout phase. Argentina beat Poland 2-0 with both teams advancing, meaning Argentina will play Australia in the next round after they beat Denmark 1-0.
New Zealand jockey James McDonald has won the annual World's Best Jockey Award. The Australian-based McDonald won 9 of the qualifying races to take the title. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, all the big names in music. Graham Downs chooses Symphony No. 9 in C Major by Schubert for Crescendo, celebrating 75 years of the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra. And Don McGlashan joins me in the studio for a pre-Christmas chat, hot on the heels of a #1 album, Bright November Morning, and a nationwide tour. Eggnog a Go-Go will serve them up. Join us on Nights with Karen Hay after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
RNZ National funded through New Zealand On Air. Lisa Owen and Checkpoint is next. Right now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. Northland to Whanganui, including the central high country. Fine spells and isolated showers mainly in the west. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Mainly fine today, scattered showers developing in the east later tomorrow. Manawatu to Wellington and Wairarapa mainly fine, but scattered showers tomorrow from late morning until late afternoon. For Nelson, fine today, scattered showers developing late tomorrow afternoon. Bulla and Western partly cloudy with isolated showers mainly inland. Marlborough and Canterbury isolated showers today, but scattered rain south of Christchurch and possibly thundery south of Timaru. Mostly cloudy tomorrow with scattered showers. For Otago, Southland and Fiordland, showers in Southland and Clutha, and a few showers spreading further north at times. Thunderstorms are possible in North Otago this evening, and for the Chatham Islands, cloudy today with occasional rain and mainly fine tomorrow with the odd shower. It's 5:07.
Nā mihi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint i tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Confirmation today that 5-year-old Malachi Subecz was failed by multiple government agencies, something his family say they already knew. The little boy was beaten, starved, tortured and eventually murdered by Michaela Barrable, the woman Malachi's mum trusted to look after him when she was jailed. Family members reported abuse to Oranga Tamariki, but their concerns were dismissed. That was in June 2021 and by November he was dead. Now, an independent review commissioned by agencies meant to protect Malachi has highlighted a litany of shortcomings and concluded more could have been done to save his life. It makes 14 recommendations. So far, the government's only committed to adopting 9, but Malachi's family are desperate for him to be an angel of real change, saying his death cannot be in vain. Marnie Dunlop reports.
It makes for devastating reading. Burnt, tortured and beaten was how the dinosaur-loving boy Malachi Subecz was treated in his last days before he died in hospital on November 12, 2021. His murderer, Michaela Barrable, is in prison. But there were many alarms raised. Agencies failed to protect Malachi. A report of concern, among many others, was first made to Oranga Tamariki by a family member in June 2021. The file was closed in the same month, with the social worker saying there was no concern for his care and protection, and it was signed off because at that stage the family court was involved. The rationale was if there were any concerns, the court would pick them up. They didn't, which is just one example of a key finding in Dame Karen Potasi's report, which said inadequate sharing across agencies meant it made Malachi invisible. His uncle says there is no doubt Malachi would still be alive if Oranga Tamariki had acted appropriately. His statement is voiced.
Inexperienced staff, inappropriate supervision, leadership, resourcing and cultural issues within OT sites and regions, and gaps in the safety nets that should keep children safe are all listed within the reports. OT has acknowledged that it did not follow its own guidelines, never spoke to Malachi or delivered upon its obligations to engage with whānau. Malachi is a change angel. His death cannot be in vain.
Oranga Tamariki's internal report lays out in detail the myriad of failings and the lack of action after family kept raising complaints. The agency used the same reasoning, at one point saying there was no role for Oranga Tamariki. His cousin applied for custody through the family court in July 2021. It was declined and later granted an expedited hearing in September. But that hearing never happened because Barrable didn't make herself available. Malachi was murdered before it could be rescheduled. Dame Karen Potasi is calling for changes across the 6 agencies she investigated. She says Malachi became an invisible child because there were those who tried to act but weren't listened to, those who were uncertain and didn't act, and those who knew and chose not to act.
Malachi was failed by the system, and that's why I've identified 5 key gaps that need to be addressed to ensure that we have overlapping safety nets. So I'm looking for overlapping hardwired safety nets so that children don't fall between those.
She made 14 recommendations. Staff at his childcare noticed physical injuries, took photos and questioned his carer, who said he fell from his bike and they didn't report it. Mandatory reporting for any suspected abuse has been recommended in past reviews into child welfare, but has been met with reluctance. Dame Karen says things are different now.
In talking with New South Wales and Victoria, both of whom have had mandatory reporting for a significant period of time, I am confident that that risk can be managed, and that risk is managed by the package that you put around mandatory reporting, being very clear about the criteria.
Senior Oranga Tamariki staff who were involved no longer work with the organisation. The minister responsible for the agency, Kelvin says he hopes that this horrific loss will change the system so that no more children will die. But after yet another damning report, repeating what agencies have been told for years, the focus will now be on whether there's any action to back up the rhetoric.
And Children's Minister Kelvin joins us now. Tēnā koe e te minita.
Tēnā koe, Lisa.
What would you like to say to Malachi's family?
Without a doubt, the system failed Malachi, and for that I am extremely sorry. We'll work out alongside Oranga Tamariki the appropriate way to make that apology to the whānau.
If staff at Oranga Tamariki had done their jobs, would Malachi still be alive?
Look, without a doubt, Oranga Tamariki missed the first opportunity to intervene. It's what the report says, the practice review, it reflects what the Ombudsman's report said a couple of months ago. And unfortunately, when Oranga Tamariki dropped that ball, then there weren't other agencies there to also catch the opportunity. And so as a result, sadly, Malachi passed away.
So that's a yes then. He would probably still be alive if they'd done their jobs properly.
It's quite likely that he would still be alive if all the agencies have done what they were meant to do.
Just in terms of, you say there was a lost opportunity, there was multiple lost opportunities, wasn't there, Minister? First person to view the case closes it. When it goes to a senior supervisor, they sign it off too. Already you've got two things there. Someone fails to upload the photo of the damage to his face to a file on time. No notes are added to the file. It wasn't just one thing. They failed multiple times, did they not?
Yeah, so that's what the practice review says. But the first opportunity that was presented was that they should have investigated in depth the report of concern that the family made. And of course, then when that didn't happen, Oranga Tamariki missed other opportunities, but also other agencies that should have been there as a safety net. They weren't there, and sadly, what has happened has happened.
Okay, so who's been fired over this then?
So the senior managers that were there, the senior social workers, they don't work there any longer. Some left of their own accord, and there was an employment process that went through for the others. So there has been accountability at that level. The site also has been
Sorry, Minister, I just want clarification there. So you say there's several people who no longer work there. Which one? How many were fired? 1, 2, 3?
So as I said, there were two that I think they read the writing was on the wall and left of their own accord. There was an employment process that was gone through, and another person left as a result. But I'm not going to go into the details. Okay, were any payments made to them? Not to my understanding, no.
Okay, and what roles did they play? Was that the person who failed to initiate an investigation and the supervisor who signed off on closing the case? Are they among the people who are no longer there?
So the senior social workers who are involved no longer work for Oranga Tamariki.
And what roles did they play in this?
Well, they were senior social workers at that site. And
Minister, did they close the investigation? Are they the people who closed the investigation?
Well, they were the people who were involved in Malachi's case. They no longer work for Oranga Tamariki.
Okay, so two core recommendations from this report are that agencies who work with children have a mandatory obligation to report alleged abuse to Oranga Tamariki, and that Oranga Tamariki vets caregivers where a solo parent goes to jail. Why are you not pushing ahead with those things immediately?
Well, as Dame Karen said today herself, that she would think it appropriate that the government takes their time to consider these recommendations. There were three governments previous to our one that have investigated and rejected mandatory reporting. I'd like to know their reasons and to see if they are still valid. But we should look at what is happening in Australia. New South Wales has had mandatory reporting since 1977, but in 2014 there was no clear evidence of the effectiveness of mandatory reporting legislation on protecting children in Australia or elsewhere. There was a white paper that the previous national government commissioned.
Minister, the person that was hired to do the independent investigation into these agencies and make recommendations to you has done an investigation and recommended, in fact, it's one of her top recommendations for mandatory reporting. Why do you not trust her and go ahead with it? That's what she was hired to do, make the recommendations.
And as she said today, if you had heard her interview, she said she would expect that the government would take their time. These are serious
but she also said she believes it can work, Minister.
And she also said that the government should take its time over the recommendations. So the last thing we need to do is knee-jerk reaction, like I was trying to explain. There are reasons that other governments have not gone ahead with mandatory reporting. We do need to look at the evidence from Australia so that we can learn the best practice. We can also learn what hasn't worked there. So we're not saying that we're not going to do it. We're saying that we need to take our time and look at this properly.
Just on this point, Minister, a childcare centre where Malachi went took a photo of an egg-sized injury to his head. And when they questioned him, the suggestion the caregiver made was that he'd had a bike accident. The little boy said no, that hadn't happened, and that his caregiver would be very angry with him. That childcare centre put a post-it note on the photo and stuffed it in a drawer, and that was that. Isn't that a glaring example of why you need mandatory reporting?
You know, I think that most education centres or schools would have reported that. The issue is how, and I as I said today in the stand-up, that if I put on my principal's hat again, I would be saying to all my staff that we should be safe rather than sorry, and that we should report any incident, any bruise, cut, scratch, or any concerns we have. Now, that may mean that a number of innocent parents will have a knock on the door from police or oranga tamariki, but I'd rather that they were annoyed at the school for making a report than have a child slip through the gaps. Well, what that will mean, because we already have 70,000 reports of concern a year, that might push that number up to, say, 500,000, and then you have genuine reports of concern that get lost under the weight of reports of concern that are made. That's why we need to take our time and think through this really carefully. We've got to look at all elements of mandatory reporting.
And Dame Karen has recommended a tight definition so that doesn't happen. But Minister, on a different subject, have you spoken to Malachi's family?
Well, as I have said, when alongside Oranga Tamariki, we will work out the best way to make an apology. So I haven't yet, but if that is what they would like to see, then I'm happy to do that.
OK, that's the apology, but have you picked up the phone to speak to them about the findings from today?
Well, I don't think it's appropriate just yet. I think it's appropriate that we work out how the family want to be engaged with by me, if that's what they want, but in particular by Oranga Tamariki.
Ngā mihi mō te wā, Minister. Thank you for your time. That was Children's Minister Kelvin Davis there. It is 19 minutes after 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Want to know what you think about that? Text us on 2101, email us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Should there be mandatory reporting if you work in an agency that cares for children or works with children? If you suspect child abuse, should there be a legal obligation for you to report it? Let us know what you think. The first person in this country to ever be charged and convicted of sabotage is facing just over 3 years in prison. 62-year-old Graham Phillip was sentenced today in the High Court in Hamilton. The anti-COVID mandate campaigner damaged infrastructure owned by national grid operator Transpower. Our reporter Andrew McRae was in court.
Am I allowed to say something? I would say that I was... would you advise me to say anything, Bill? Yes? No, in that case I'll take the advice of my counsel and I won't say anything.
Thank you, Mr. Phillip.
Until today's sentencing, all details surrounding the sabotage committed by Phillip was suppressed. But after submissions by the Crown, Defence and Media, Justice Tahana lifted the lid ever so slightly to shine some light on what happened. And while it's only a morsel, it gives people some idea of what he did. The judge outlined what could be reported.
That Mr. Phillip sabotaged infrastructure belonging to Transpower. Second, one act of sabotage caused a fire. And third, the total cost to repair the damage and ensure the safety of the infrastructure is likely to exceed $1.25 million. Publication of all other facts of the offending is forbidden.
Crown Prosecutor Amanda Gordon told the court Phillip showed no remorse for his offending.
It seems from the material provided that he's a relatively intelligent man, and it must have been blatantly obvious to him the potential harm that could have been caused from his actions.
Phillip's lawyer Bill Napney says he clearly accepted the action he took was not proportionate to his opposition to vaccine mandates. He accepts what he did was wrong.
He makes no bones about that, and he's also taken on board the comments that his wife has made as to the effect that his actions have had on those around him. Not just him, but also his family, which he didn't take into account and which he now deeply regrets as well. But he also deeply regrets the potential effect that his actions could have had on the New Zealand community.
Justice Tahana's sentence starting point was 4.5 years, but she deducted 30% for guilty pleas and Phillip's good character, including no previous convictions.
Your risk of reoffending is assessed as low, but the risk of harm if you did offend is assessed as high. And I note that your counsel, Mr. Nabney, says you are unlikely to reoffend given your offending was brought about because of your views on the vaccine mandates, which no longer apply.
Justice Tahana didn't order Phillip to pay reparation to Transpower because he had no assets or savings.
Andrew McRae reporting there. It is 23 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. all whakaaro. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening, particularly interested in your views on that report into the death of Malachi Subecz and how the government agencies handled reports of abuse. He has slipped through the cracks and they've acknowledged that. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time to go to the headlines. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
Thank you, Lisa. Actually, Marama, but kia ora, Lisa. One of Aotearoa's greatest ever athletes, Sir Murray Halberg, has died aged 89. He was the first New Zealander to run a sub-4-minute mile in 1958, but will forever be remembered for winning gold in the 5,000 metres at the 1960 Rome Olympics. Halberg was also a two-time Commonwealth Games gold medalist. The Children's Minister has admitted that Malachi Subecz, the 5-year-old who was tortured to death by his caregiver a year ago, was failed by the system. Kelvin Davis told Checkpoint that it's quite likely that Malachi would still be alive if all the government agencies involved had done what they need to do. But he's defending the decision not to adopt all the recommendations from a damning review into Malachi's death, saying there needs to be a balance between reporting cases that need to be flagged and people reporting out of fear they might be penalised if they don't. Malachi's family say there's no doubt he would still be alive if Oranga Tamariki had acted on their concerns. Malachi's uncle says his death cannot be in vain. Drivers who fail to stop for police could have their licences disqualified for longer under new changes. That could be up to 2 years for those caught fleeing more than once. At the moment, it's 1 year. And House Democrats in the US have picked the New York Congressman Hakeem Jeffries to lead the party in the chamber from next year. Jeffries, who will replace the current Speaker Nancy Pelosi, will be the first black lawmaker to lead either party in Congress. We'll have more news at 5:40.
Thank you, Marama Te Pole, not Eva. Evie, sorry about that. Tributes are flowing for athletics legend Sir Murray Halberg, who has died aged 89. Well known as a brilliant runner, the Olympic 5,000 metre gold medalist was also widely regarded for establishing the Halberg Foundation, which supports children with disabilities in sport. Here's the moment Sir Murray won that gold medal in the 1960 Olympic Games in Rome.
Halberg looks over his shoulder as he comes into the straight. Halberg still leading. He's going away now from Grabowski. He's going away and Halberg wins.
And here's Sir Murray speaking about how he never saw his Olympic success as dominating his life.
We all have a turn at the top, and I think a top sportsman's life is fairly limited. I'd been at the top, as it were, for about 4 or 5 years, and I think that was a fair innings.
Well, sports reporter Clay Wilson joins us now. Clay, not just a loss for the New Zealand sports fraternity, but for the country in general, yes?
Yeah, someone who made a huge contribution to this country. You talk about his on-track success. We heard the Rome gold medal there, which was, of course, part of that famous golden hour with Sir Peter Snell there in Rome in 1960. He was also the first New Zealander to break the 4-minute mile. He won 2 Commonwealth Games gold medals, and he set 4 world records, so achieved a huge amount on the track, and all with that famous withered arm, which people who have seen his footage of him running, it was very distinctive the way he ran, and that was, he suffered a serious injury playing rugby when he was young, and so to overcome that, to go on to that kind of success, just shows what kind of character he was. He was part of that Arthur Lydiard squad, the famous
running,
squad.
Training miles on end.
Exactly, he was one of the originals of that group and one of the most successful of that group. But his legacy was equally as strong off the track, as you mentioned, about the Halberg Foundation, established in 1963. So it's been going for almost 60 years now, and sort of providing grants to young children to improve their lives through sport. Children that are physically disabled and perhaps might not have the opportunities that other kids might have. It's been helping them. And of course, we also associate his name with the Halberg Awards, which is our annual sports awards. And that doubles as not only the sports awards, but also the main fundraiser for that foundation, so that the foundation can continue going on, as it does today, to provide for physically disabled children in this country.
Yeah, it's an incredible legacy. Let's talk about football now. All Whites might not be at the World Cup, but a New Zealander, it's under the spotlight in Qatar. Tell us more.
Well, officiating, it's very high pressure job, isn't it? And at this kind of tournament, it doesn't get much more pressurised as an environment as that. And there's always going to be controversial moments, but this is probably, so far in the tournament anyway, the most contentious. And part of the reason for that is France versus Tunisia. And Tunisia, of course, is a former colony of France, so a lot of emotion around the match anyway. And Tunisia are up 1-0 late in this game, right deep into extra time, and France score an equaliser. The game restarts, and then the game ends, and then after that they decide they're going to check with the television official, and Matt Conga decides to rule out the goal, much to the French team and the French fans, to their disapproval. So France have actually said they're going to file a complaint to FIFA about it. At the end of the day, it hasn't actually affected France. They were already through to the round of 16, but I guess it's just part of the territory in being an official, and it just happens to be that it's a New Zealander in the spotlight this time around.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Clay. Clay Wilson with sport there. The Christmas cheer has finally returned to Franklin Road, and the famous light show will be switched on again tonight. It's a hallmark of Auckland's festive season, but the lights have been out for the last 2 Christmases because of COVID. That means the return of maybe the most festive street in the country, I bet that's debated, has been hotly anticipated. Our reporter Louise Tanous joins us now from Franklin Road. Louise, what's happening up there?
That's right, Lisa. The anticipation is building. We're still a few hours away from switch on, but we've already seen people frantically doing some last minute setting up. We've got snowmen, we've got reindeer, we've got multicoloured lights. After a 2-year hiatus, people are really going above and beyond. And I'm joined now by Roscoe, who's donned his Santa suit. Now, Roscoe's the brains behind the light show. Roscoe, tell us how long you've been involved, and how did the light show actually come about to begin with?
Oh, it originally just came about by a group of neighbours just putting up lights one year, and then it just grew on from there.
And just how many houses do you have that take part each year?
Pre-COVID, we had 2019, we had 105 homes lit.
My Christmas hat is falling off there, Lisa. I've got in the spirit as well for those that are listening and not watching. Now, Roscoe, what can people expect tonight? It's been 2 years of no lights at all. Great to have them back, firstly, but is there anything special that's happening tonight?
Well, we're just taking a softly approach this year for the opening, and we're doing a little barbecue at 8 o'clock, and then we're having a local celebrity turn the lights on at 8:30. And
you're the eyes and the ears of this place. What can people look out for? It's been 2 years of a break. Have people gone above and beyond? It seems like it to me, but you'll know best.
Well, I think the coolest thing is the new people who've moved into the street, and they seem to be really keen on putting on a show. I've had people move in next to me. They were a week ago, and they've already done a great display on their front lawn. So it's everybody. It's a free gift from the people of Franklin Road. So you can't expect anything. It's just whatever they want to give on the day, and you never know what they're going to do until the night, really.
And just building on that, we were chatting before, there are some misconceptions that some of this is funded, but as you were saying, it's all just from residents. It comes from the heart. They pay for the lights themselves.
Yeah, it's a free gift from the people of Franklin Road. We don't have any sponsorship or commercialisation. We get a little bit of money from the Waitemata board, which is greatly appreciated, which pays for the barbecue on the opening night. But it's a free gift from the people of Franklin Road to the people of Auckland.
And a lot of people will be wondering about COVID. We're still living through this pandemic. Obviously, you held off the last 2 years, but are you taking any precautions in terms of, you don't want to be a super spreader, do you?
No, but that's one of the reasons why we're doing a soft opening tonight. And I think the country's got to a stage where it's personal, it's up to yourself looking after it. If you want to wear a mask, that's great. We encourage that. We're outdoors. People have to take personal responsibility for what they do. We've put the lights on, and I think it'll be fine.
What's it been like the last 2 years around Christmas with no lights?
It hasn't felt like Christmas at all. We're so used to having the decorations and the people on the street and the fun and just the whole atmosphere that I've really noticed it in the last 2 years. And I've put up a couple of little lights, but it doesn't really feel like Christmas until Franklin Road Christmas lights are turned on.
And I've got to ask, do you have a favourite this year?
Ooh, I'd be killed if I said which was my favourite.
Thanks so much for your time, Roscoe. So for those that are keen to check them out, the lights will switch on at 8:30 tonight and they'll be on until 10:30 and they're running up until Christmas Eve, so do come down and have a look.
Thanks, Louise. I cannot let you go without commenting on your headwear. That is a doozy of a hat. I don't know, is it a cross between a pirate and an elf? I'm not sure.
I think it's a Christmas tree.
Oh, yes, now it makes sense. I'm hoping you're going to wear that back to the office. Thank you, Louise. Louise Ternouth, live from Franklin Road. Go online, check out the video just to see the hat. Apparently, it is a Christmas tree. I'll let you decide. It is 27 minutes to 6. Kia amo tunu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is, of course, time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier, who joins me in the studio. Nona, many households would struggle to pay a big bill or support a loved one through a financial crisis. How do we know that? How widespread is the problem?
Yeah, we've had some different surveys come out, one from Payments New Zealand that manages the transactions that go back and forth through all kinds of mediums. A quarter of households now are apparently will struggle to pay a big bill. And that's not a surprise, I guess, with the higher interest rates and what have you, higher cost of living, inflation that we're seeing in grocery stores. I mean, it's really tough for a lot of families on a tight budget. And so now at this time of year, when you've got Christmas coming and all that expense, holidays, etc., it's really tight for some households. So it's not a great situation. We've also heard from the Financial Services Council that a number of people are putting off providing, additional backup support. So insurance, income insurance, life insurance, disability insurance, those types of things that you tend to put in place for the protection of your family should the worst thing happen. That's definitely falling by the wayside as well. So overall, we're seeing that squeeze in the household incomes and their ability to pay for those extras, well, whether they're something you really need or not.
Yeah, okay. How are the markets looking?
Interesting. We had a long update from the U.S. Federal Reserve overnight, this morning our time. He spoke for about an hour and used the kinds of words that are music to the ears of people in the market. Use the word like soft landing, slowing the pace of interest rate hikes, waiting to see how inflation develops, not trying to tackle it all at once, this sort of thing. That totally calmed the market. That saw the US dollar fall quite significantly. As a result, the New Zealand dollar rose one whole US cent against, of course, the US dollar. It went to 63.2. So yesterday, 62.2. Today, yeah. 63.2. And of course, the Kiwi also was at 93 cents Australian and 52.3 British pence. The market is pricing in a US rate hike of 50 basis points on the 14th of December, thereabouts. If it's more than that, we could see some more movement in the Kiwi versus the US. However, if it comes in at that rate, that's already been fully priced in. So maybe this is a good space for the Kiwi for now, leading into the new year. And not just for that, but the equity markets, the share market is also doing really well because risk assets are back in favor because of what's happening in the US. So the top 50 index, it rose 0.9%, and that builds on yesterday's 1.33% increase. So that's 103 points to 11,655. And we're seeing that right across the board through Asia and so on. So it's got a much more positive tone, and that's all because the U.S. Federal Reserve has cooled its jets.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier there with Business News. Let's get to some of your feedback now. A number of you getting in touch about the report into how agencies dealt with Malachi Subecz case, the little boy who was murdered by his carer. This person says, Kia ora, Lisa, the social workers responsible for Malachi's death shouldn't be social workers or allowed near children, not just fired from Oranga Tamariki. And that is from a universal auntie. she says. Someone else says, oranga tamariki time and time again fail. Mandatory reporting is not something you can argue away. It's cowardly and inexcusable not to bring in mandatory reporting, Liz says. The system failed, Malachi, says one listener, and also his mother, they believe. Kick it down the road, Kelvin, this person says. Accountability for a 5-year-old's death, apologies to the family. Yeah, right. And Lawrence says mandatory reporting, absolutely, with a exclamation mark and all capital letters. And this one, before we move on, of course we should have mandatory reporting. A little piece of my heart bleeds every time we have one of these horrific deaths. And I am sure most decent people would feel the same. Do keep your feedback coming, 2101 on text. You can email us, checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. The political top dogs were in Hamilton today trying to scoop up votes for the upcoming by-election. It's a situation Labor hope to avoid because it's shaping up to be a litmus test for next year's election, while National's busy painting itself as the underdog. Jonty Dine reports.
Jacinda Ardern and Christopher Luxton were both in Hamilton West, hunting out voters and pumping up their candidates. There was one major issue on the agenda.
Crime. And what we have is a government that is soft on crime, that actually hasn't shown enough care for the victims and hasn't got serious consequences for serious repeat offenders.
But Jacinda Ardern says the crime wave is crashing.
We are seeing initiatives have an impact. We have seen a decrease in the spike that we've seen around ram raids, but we want to keep going so that we can continue to bring down retail crime.
Both leaders say crime is the number one issue facing voters of West Hamilton. Nationals man is Tama Potaka.
I've got huge respect for him. I met him initially, actually when I came into botany, and he just saw the incredible work that he was doing in Māori development with Ngātai and the local iwi. He has an amazing commercial track record. He's done more for Hamilton West than any candidate in this race, big time.
While Labor is pushing the credentials of its candidate, Georgie Danzy.
We have a local candidate here who passionately believes in her community and has passionately advocated for it. Georgie's lived here for several decades. She has a business here. She's an advocate. I believe that Hamilton will be best represented by having a local community member in Parliament.
Luxon says the people of Hamilton West are over the crime problem, and Potaka says he's the man to clean it up.
I've spent many years, 10 years, living in the community, helping to build homes, helping to build infrastructure and helping to build the community, running charitable events with my wife and a whole bunch of other things. So I'm really indoctrinated and engrossed in the community and here to help serve the hard-working people of Hamilton West and be a strong voice for them in Parliament.
Labor's Georgie Danzy has concerns about low voter turnout on the back of Tauranga's recent by-election.
Look, we're doing everything we can to get voters out, and I hope that they get out and vote as much.
Newly independent MP Gaurav Sharma, who sparked the by-election with his resignation, is also running for the seat, with massive billboards around town, a sign he's still in it to win it. Hamilton West is a bellwether seat. It's typically won by the party who wins the most votes on election day.
I'm here to win, although I am the underdog. I'm here to work hard and earn the right to be the MP.
Luxon's message to the Hamilton West voters is simple.
Vote and send Tama Potaka to Wellington to send a message to this government that's just not good enough.
The Prime Minister says the seat is a crucial one for Labor.
We are working hard in this seat because this is a city that's important to us.
Just over 2,000 votes have been cast in the 3 days since early voting began. Polling day is Saturday, December 10.
And we have just had an interesting statement in from Auckland Transport. It has been looking for a new CEO and says it found one in July. Now, this person was based overseas and had to go through immigration processes, which concluded at the time of the Auckland Council elections. However, it says with the arrival of the new council and the changes to AT board, the environment has changed. The preferred candidate has now told the board they won't be taking up the role of CEO. AT says it's disappointing, but they wholly respect the person's decision. The board is now considering its recruitment process options, and it has extended the interim CEO role for Mark Lambert, who will remain in this position for now. It is 13 minutes to 6, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o Whakaaro. Let us know your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Interested in your thoughts on that statement from Auckland Transport. They thought they had a new CEO, then the election happened, and now the person reckons the environment's changed and they don't want the job. 2101 on text, or you can email us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time to go to the headlines, and guess what? It's Marama.
Thank you very much, Lisa. The Children's Minister has told Checkpoint the senior social workers involved in the case of 5-year-old Malachi Subecz, who was brutally murdered by his caregiver, no longer work for Oranga Tamariki. Kelvin Davis told the program that 2 left on their own accord, while another left as a result of an employment process that happened in the wake of the boy's death. Tributes are flowing for one of New Zealand's greatest runners, Sir Murray Halberg, who has died at the age of 89. The Minister of Sport, Grant Robertson, called Sir Murray best known for winning gold in the 5,000 metres at the Rome Olympics in 1960, an extraordinary athlete. He says the country has lost a true sporting icon. The first person convicted of sabotage in New Zealand has been sentenced to 3 years and 1 month in prison. Graham Phillip pleaded guilty to 7 charges over damage done to Transpower infrastructure in November last year as a protest over COVID mandates. The Justice Minister says new law changes targeting drivers who flee from police is about providing effective deterrence. Kitty Allen says, put simply, drivers who choose to flee from police can expect to lose their vehicle. And the feature film Whina has won the inaugural Pasifika Award at the Hawaii International Film Festival. The drama charts Dame Whina Cooper's path to becoming one of Aotearoa's most formidable leaders. Another film, Kāinga, has won the festival's trailblazing category. We'll have more news at 6.
Ngā mihi. Dairy owners wanting a subsidised smoke cannon to ward off would-be robbers now have another option on the table. Entrepreneur Sarai Avery is offering dairy owners in the Auckland suburb of Sandringham a free trial of a so-called wearable silent alarm. Shopkeepers under threat can hit the alarm on the watch and it calls directly through to police dispatch. Sarai Avery joins us now. Kia ora, Sarai.
Good afternoon.
It sounds like it's a lot like a personal alarm, so what's different about it?
Well, what's different about it is that, back up the bus a bit, we've been using this technology for over 6 years in America, Australia and New Zealand. It hasn't been picked up so much in New Zealand, but certainly the Americans and the Australians have picked it up. What makes it different is it's basically a phone on your wrist. And it's not just a button that sends an alarm through to the police. It opens a 3-way conversation between the victim, the call centre and the police dispatch. Now, in Australia, what we've managed to do is to bypass completely all of the impediments to getting the cops there. What happens is it goes straight through to the police car nearest to the area where the alarm's been activated. So the response time is very, very fast. We've rolled it out in New Zealand mainly through rest homes for people who need to be looked after, and if they fall over in the shower, they can push the button and an ambulance will come. Or somebody with Alzheimer's, we can geofence them and find out when they've gone outside the area and got lost. But also in domestic violence, which is the closest we've got to what's happening in the dairies. So in the domestic violence situation, if somebody thinks that they're going to have a bit of biffo, you can push the silent alarm. Now, of course, we can program this thing remotely to do all sorts of things. So in the dairy situation, we may well make the alarm activated in a voice way where it would say, alarm active, because that's what it does. It's terrifying when you hear it. Alarm activated, alarm activated. It's like one of those space movies, alarm activated, alarm, and it's very annoying. And that could cause somebody to run away. But in the domestic violence situation, we put it on silent alarm, and the person that's wearing the watch can decide what they want to do with it.
Okay, so how effective has it been in the pilots that you have done?
Oh, really, fantastically effective. I mean, in Australia, typically, in any 3-month period, we'll actually save at least 8 to 9 women's lives because they're actually being beaten up by somebody to the point of... Well, what happens when you push that button is it goes into what we call a P1 alert. That goes straight through the emergency system into the police dispatch where somebody's life is being threatened.
So the
Okay.
police here, they have signed up to this level of escalation using this alarm, have they?
Well, back up the bus. What happens is that there are many what we call cloud-based services in New Zealand that work with the police, like ADT and a whole number of people that have a certification for a P1 alert. So what we use is our cloud-based server to link into that system and send it straight down the line. So you don't have to dial 111 or just... So the average response time that we've had with the trials we've done in New Zealand is 3 minutes. And that's around the same time as what goes on in a burglary situation.
So how much does it cost normally?
It'll cost you $300 for the hardware, and if you want to monitor it yourself and your family wants to monitor it, then that's the total cost. But if you want us to monitor it 24/7 in the cloud, now what you can do with that is, if we monitor it, what we can do is, if you've got your daughter working in the dairy, you can go online through an app on your phone and actually see what's happening to her and listen to what's going on, or you can send her a text and say, are you okay? Is everything okay? So it's not just an emergency response. It's a phone on a watch which has, what we do is we personalise it for every single person. And we can do this remotely. And that's the real magic.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is Sarai Avery, entrepreneur there, and offering a free trial to some Sandringham dairy owners of an alarm watch. While the fatal stabbing of Sandringham dairy worker Janak Patel has reignited the debate about punishment versus rehabilitation for offenders. But a Waikato-based trust claims to provide a solution that's based on respect rather than retribution. Te Whānau Trust is a native plant nursery and training centre that welcomes people from all walks of life to learn new skills and get paid while they do it. Reporter Tom Taylor and camera operator Nick Monroe have the story.
It's about earning while you're learning and having a sense of purpose.
Adrian Dalton embodies the notion of wraparound support. The co-founder of Te Whānau Trust begins her day with a drive from the family farm and plant nursery in Miranda. She picks a van load of people up from Pukekohe, and any stragglers may get a personal visit to get them out of bed and back to Miranda. For Ms Dalton, it's more than a job. Her employees are like family.
Whāngai is to nurture people and to awhi them as your own, and you never turn away your own family members, so once somebody's been in the trust, we never turn them away.
Some people join Te Whāngai to learn new skills. Tamati's been in the program for about 2 months.
I'm just learning how to pot and stuff at the moment. And these are all baby plants right here. These are only small ones. So they'll be all growing up next year, ready to go out.
Others get a sense of achievement from earning an income. Cassius has been with Te Whāngai for about 6 years. Before that, he was on the benefit for 25.
My missus said it was time for me to go to work. And she used to work here before, so she said it would be a good place for me to socialise and get into having a bit more education about trees. But she's passed on now, so carrying it on for her.
Te Whāngai has helped Cassius to pass his level 1 and 2 and foster a passion for the environment.
The more trees I plant, well, then it'll be here for my great-great-grandchildren, and that's what it's about.
The trust accepts anyone who walks up its driveway, including referrals from the police. It currently employs 15 young people who've either committed offences or who the police have identified at being at risk of offending. Liam returned to Te Whāngai after spending time in prison.
To come out of prison straight back into mahi is been real healthy for me, man. My mindset, physically and mentally, because I'm not at home thinking about the crime I did or reoffending, and I'm also gives me a chance to make up for what I did wrong.
Ms Dalton says while National's boot camp proposal might appeal to people in search of quick responses to crime, it's unrealistic to expect 100% success from hardline policies. According to the Ministry of Justice, about 70% of people are reconvicted within 2 years of release from prison. And that's the reason for Te Whāngai's open door policy.
You leave your past at the gate, and it's about second chance, or for some people, their first opportunity.
After the Trust's pilot program, 73% of its high-risk recidivist youth offenders did not go on to reoffend. whereas a study into 11 Christchurch-based military-style camps found just 14% of participants did not reoffend.
The boot camps are a great option for some youth that haven't experienced discipline or have a huge need in their lives, but you can't just do the boot camp and then let them go back to the environment that they've been in previously.
Over the last 16 years, Te Whāngai has helped more than 800 trainees into work and currently employs a team of 75. Ms Dalton's been recognised with an Order of Merit, and the Trust has won the Green Ribbon Award for environmental achievements. But this praise hasn't translated into a steady stream of support. Te Whāngai is still waiting to learn the outcome of an application for funding under the government's Better Pathways programme.
And if you are listening to that and would like to watch the video with Tom and Nick's story, we'll put it up on our web page. 7 minutes to 6, kia mau tonu mai, stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. After a few lean seasons, the New Zealand Breakers are back home and back at the top of the Australian NBL standings. At the halfway point in the season, the Breakers are leading the competition with 10 wins and 3 losses. It is a drastic turnaround from the same point last season, when the basketball club had won just once. Tonight, the Breakers return to Christchurch Arena. Felicity Reid reports.
For much of the last few seasons, the Breakers have had to call Australia home. Unable to travel because of COVID, they had to sit up there or miss out entirely. Their form suffered. They lost a record number of home games. Now they're back home.
It's been their night. The Breakers are the real deal. Make no mistake about it. New Zealand are a genuine title contender.
Coach Mody Mayor can take some of the credit for turning the team around and reconnecting with New Zealand talent. But he isn't putting too much stock in where they sit with 9 rounds of the regular season still to play. He knows they haven't played the same number of games as their opposition, or even played every team in the league yet.
Winning is always an intersection of a lot of different things. It's about how you perform as an individual, it's about how a team is performing together, it has to do with technical, tactical, mental and physical aspects. At the moment, I feel like we are on an upward trend in all of those, and in all of those we are very far away from where we want to be as a finished product.
Captain Tom Abercrombie has been in the NBL for 14 seasons. He's seen the good times and the bad. He's won championships and taken the wooden spoon. Abercrombie says they're focused on the road ahead.
One thing we've done since coming in this year is not try to dwell on the past or look back at what we've been through. Obviously it was motivated to come out and work hard and be successful this year.
Abercrombie says there's a special feeling in the side.
Everyone's bought into what we're trying to do. There's a real collective mindset. Everyone's willing to do what it takes to be successful and win, and guys willing to sacrifice. It helps when you can see the results.
Former NBA player Jarrell Brantley is a newcomer who is buying in. And the American import says he feels right at home with the Auckland-based club.
Everybody from top to bottom in this organization right now, is something special going on here. I know y'all see our wins and losses, but we're able to build something. And so for me, it's just been special to be a part of it.
Brantley is one of the Breakers' best players this season and a key cog in a trio of imports who are having an impact at both ends of the court. The 26-year-old Ford believes as much as he has to offer the Breakers, the club can also make him a better player.
The coaches have been challenging me. We've been crafting and working on so much, even more than what you see. I think me being the worker that I am, that's the fun part. I'm able to do so much more, and I want to do so much more. So every day is just a stepping stone.
Mayor is a tough taskmaster who will keep pushing for perfection, but he also has perspective.
What matters is the game against Southeast. What matters is how we defend. What matters is how we compete. All the rest is just noise.
Tip-off in the game tonight is at 7:30.
Felicity Reid reporting there. It is 4 minutes to 6. One of the many beautiful songs written by Christy McVie, Songbird, the hugely talented singer and songwriter from the band Fleetwood Mac, has died at the age of 79. The band sold more than 100 million records worldwide, making them one of the most successful groups ever. The BBC's David Silito looks back.
Fleetwood Mac and Don't Stop, the song Bill Clinton chose as his campaign anthem. for songwriter Christine McVie. She'd been part of the British blues scene in the 60s with the band Chicken Shack and also as a solo artist before joining Mick Fleetwood and her husband John McVie. She had a gift for writing hits. Little lies everywhere you make love and fun. Many of the band's best known songs were her work, but she tired of the endless touring. There was a long break, but she rejoined the band in 2014. Fleetwood Mac has had many ups and downs, but their success owed much to the songwriting skill of Christine McVie. In a statement, the band said, "We were so lucky to have a life with her."
A sweet voice, Christine McVie, aged 79. Let's get to some of your feedback now on Oranga Tamariki. This person says excuses, excuses, excuses. How many reports, reviews and recommendations about Oranga Tamariki do we have to be sorry about before we see real change? And how many more children have to lose their lives before lessons are learned? Now, Liz has got in touch and says, I worked for Oranga Tamariki and I investigated child deaths and made recommendations to them to improve professional practice, response times and measures to address the breakdown of communication between services engaged with the family and wider safety nets. That was 20 years ago. I left OT due to their systematic failure to address these fundamental issues. There was nothing more I could do, says Liz. Another person says social workers are undertrained and underpaid to take on the responsibilities they have to, but mandatory reporting should be the culture, especially in complex and tricky cases. Someone else on the Minister saying he's going to consider mandatory reporting. Melissa says the Minister said they wanted to do it right, not that they wouldn't institute mandatory reporting. That is just being responsible.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Marama Tipole. The Minister of Sport, Grant Robertson, has paid tribute to Sir Murray Halberg, saying the country has lost a true sporting icon. The Minister says Sir Murray was an extraordinary athlete whose gold medal in the 5,000 metres at the 1960 Olympic Games has been immortalised as part of New Zealand's Golden Afternoon, with Peter Snell winning the 800 metres. Mr Robertson says the Halberg Trust, set up to support children with disabilities, changed the lives of generations of Kiwis. He says the fact that the Sportsperson of the Year awards are simply known as the Halbergs is a fitting legacy to his work. Sir Murray Halbergs never saw his Olympic success as dominating his life.
We all have a turn at the top, and I think a top sportsman's life is fairly limited. I'd been at the top, as it were, for about 4 or 5 years, and I think that was a fair innings.
Sir Murray is survived by his wife, Lady Phyllis, and 3 children and 2 grandchildren. The Children's Minister says 5-year-old Malachi Subecz would probably still be alive if Oranga Tamariki and other agencies had done their job properly. A report into his death released today found numerous gaps in the system. Kelvin Davis told Checkpoint Oranga Tamariki failed to investigate the first report from the family about suspected abuse.
Without a doubt, the system failed Malachi, and for that I am extremely sorry. We'll work out alongside Oranga Tamariki the appropriate way to make that apology to the whānau.
Kelvin Davis says 2 senior social workers involved in the case have since left Oranga Tamariki of their accord. Another left as the result of an employment process. The report's author says despite the involvement of 6 government agencies, Malachi was invisible. Dame Karen Poltasi says there have been 33 previous reports into child abuse and death in the last 30 years, many of which have made the same recommendations. But she's hopeful this one will result in real change.
By making us all focus, Malachi's death means that we will be putting in place
a greater alert system right now for what constitutes red flags of abuse. This is critical for New Zealand. If we can't get this right, then we have failed.
Dame Karen has made 14 recommendations, including better information sharing and mandatory reporting of child abuse. The government has accepted 9. The man convicted of the country's first sabotage crime has been sentenced to 3 years in prison. 62-year-old Graham Phillips sabotaged infrastructure owned by national grid operator Transpower in November last year, causing damage estimated to exceed $1.25 million. Most details were permanently suppressed. Justice Tahana's sentence starting point was 4.5 years, but she deducted time for guilty pleas and Phillips' good character.
Your risk of reoffending is assessed as low, but the risk of harm if you did offend is assessed as high. And I note that your counsel, Mr Nabney, says you are unlikely to reoffend, given your offending was brought about because of your views on the vaccine mandates, which no longer apply.
Justice Tahana didn't order Phillip to pay reparation because he has no assets or savings. Former Dilworth School chaplain Ross Douglas Brown has appeared in the Auckland District Court today, accused of another 9 child sex crimes. The 73-year-old was sentenced in December to 6.5 years behind bars for historical sexual abuse linked to Dilworth. In today's hearing, Brown pleaded not guilty to 9 charges of sexual abuse. He will remain in custody and is due to reappear in court in March 2023. Brown is one of 11 men arrested and charged with historical sexual offending at Dilworth. The latest leader of the jihadist Islamic State group has died. A spokesperson said Abu al-Hassan al-Quraishi was killed in combat with what he called the enemies of God, but gave no further details. The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says no US forces were involved.
The United States remains committed to countering the global threat from ISIS and stands ready to work with international partners who share that same goal. We will build on these counterterrorism successes, and we will keep that pressure on for sure. As far as any involvement by the U.S., as it relates to the death of al-Quraishi, it was not a result of any U.S. action, I can confirm.
The death comes just 9 months after the previous change in leadership. And the feature film Whina has won the inaugural Pasifika Award at the Hawaii International Film Festival. The drama, which charts Dame Whina Cooper's path to becoming one of Aotearoa's most formidable leaders, had already been recognised at the Sydney Film Festival and Edinburgh International Film Festival. That's the news.
Around the world, a truce is being called in the decades-long war on drugs. But here in Aotearoa, cannabis is still illegal and we convict thousands of people every year for low-level drug crimes. What is the cost of carrying on this fight? Join me, Guy and Espiner, for Wasted, an RNZ documentary examining the war on drugs. This Sunday after the 7 o'clock news, or watch now at rnz.co.nz/wasted.
RNZ National funded through New Zealand On Air. Lisa Owen and Checkpoint back in a minute, but right now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. Northland to Whanganui, including the central high country. Fine spells and isolated showers mainly in the west. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mainly fine today. Scattered showers developing in the east later tomorrow. Manawatu to Wellington and Wairarapa mainly fine, but scattered showers for tomorrow from late morning until late afternoon. Nelson, fine scattered showers developing late tomorrow afternoon. For Bulla and Westland, partly cloudy with isolated showers mainly inland. Marlborough and Canterbury, isolated showers today but scattered rain south of Christchurch and possibly thundery south of Timaru. Mostly cloudy tomorrow with scattered showers. For Otago, Southland and Fiordland, showers in Southland and Clutha. A few showers spreading further north at times and thunderstorms possible in North Otago this evening. And finally for the Chatham Islands, cloudy today with occasional rain but mainly fine for tomorrow with the odd shower. It's 7 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Invisible is what murdered 5-year-old Malachi Subecz had become to the government agencies supposed to protect him. That's one of the findings of an independent review into his care and protection. It also makes 14 recommendations, including mandatory reporting of suspected child abuse and vetting of caregivers for the children of inmates. The 5-year-old was beaten, starved, tortured and eventually murdered by Michaela Barrable, the woman Malachi's mother trusted to look after him when she was jailed. Whānau reported his abuse to Oranga Tamariki, but their concerns were dismissed. That was in June 2021, and by November he was dead. Ruth Mani's a victim advocate and has been working alongside the family. She joins us now. Ruth, it is a painful read, this report. What is the family's response to it?
Oh, kia ora, Lisa. Look, the family are devastated. Nothing can bring Malachi back. And to be honest, nothing in the report surprises Malachi's cousin or uncle. You know, they know that they did everything they could and within their means to try and save Malachi. So these reports are... I guess they give some kind of authenticity and verification, but the cousin and uncle already knew that. What they want to know is what changes are actually going to happen to stop this happening to anybody else again.
I suppose also there is significant detail in the report, and while they knew that their moko had been neglected and people hadn't looked out for him, inexperienced staffer reviewed the case. A supervisor then signed it off and closed it. Staff at Oranga Tamariki reported being overloaded. A photo of the abuse that was provided by his cousin was loaded onto the file after the agency had closed the case off. When you look at the detail of it, is there a single thing that strikes you the most?
Preventable. You know, it is just a long list of fatal errors, and that's what the families speak of. You know, not only did they call, they then sent a photo. You know, they did everything they could. And Dame Karen talks about these safety nets. There shouldn't have to be 1 or 2 or 10 safety nets. There should be the Ministry for Children that you report things to and they do their mahi. And let's not forget, you know, there's been over 33 reviews into child abuse and death in 30 years. So what has changed? And that's what the whānau are asking.
The government is hesitating at this stage to introduce some of the more significant recommendations. One, mandatory reporting. This is where agencies involved with children would be required by law to report suspected child abuse. The Minister has said he's going to look at it. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's a cop-out, isn't it? You know, Malachi passed over a year ago. What has changed? Mandatory reporting is a no-brainer. If it can save one teeny tiny child, what is the problem? You know, they do it in Australia. Why don't children are Tonga? Why are we not supporting mandatory reporting? It's a cop-out.
Unintended consequences, the Minister is basically saying. It may mean that there are a larger number of complaints and people who are innocent could be reported and investigated.
If it saves one child from a broken bone or worse, it is absolutely worth it. And if the Minister talked to the whānau, they would understand that position, but he hasn't.
Yeah, and the Minister has said that he hasn't had a conversation with the family yet. Would the family like to speak to him? What are their expectations around him picking up the phone?
Yeah, look, I can't speak for them, but we have spoken about this, and Malachi's uncle said today, look, this has happened on the PM and the Minister's watch. So why don't we sit down and have a conversation about this?
When Oranga Tamariki says it takes full responsibility for its failings, what does full responsibility look like to you?
Yeah, again, Malachi has been passed for over a year now, so full responsibility would have and should have been some very urgent changes, not just the review. The review, to be fair to the reviewers, they treated the family with respect, as they damn well should have, but they treated the family with respect, and there is a very detailed report. What the family is asking for, though, is, well, where is the detailed plan to deliver these recommendations urgently? Have the staff all received training with respect to the CPP or the Child Protection Protocol? That was found to be lacking. It was found to not be understood by people who are working in the Ministry for Children. Has that been delivered? Why not, if it hasn't?
Is this minister the person to deliver change?
Look, you would hope so, but we feel like we have been left waiting.
Really appreciate your time, Ruth. That is Ruth Money, victim advocate there, who has been working with Malachi's family. It's a good day to be an Australian after the Socceroos shocked Denmark 1-0 to progress to the knockout stage of the Football World Cup. This is what Melbourne sounded like at 3 a.m. Poland snuck through to the next round alongside Argentina, while Mexico fell short with not enough goals. And champions France are through despite a shock loss to Tunisia. The BBC's Jane Dougal has more.
After a poor start, Argentina's hopes of staying in this World Cup were resting on the shoulders of Lionel Messi. So often their saviour, but against Poland, the star striker had difficulty. It took England-based players to break through. First Brighton's Alexis McAllister, then Manchester City's Julian Alvarez scored a second, securing their qualification and leaving Poland in peril. They were dependent on the other match. This was Mexico's second goal against Saudi Arabia, a third and they were through, sending Poland home. But it wasn't to be, and Poland progress. France had already qualified, so left their best players on the bench. Opponents Tunisia took advantage, Wabi Kazri keeping his composure. Tunisia thought they were through, but celebrations were cut short as news from the other match in their group filtered through. Australia and Denmark could also qualify. Denmark the favourites, but Matthew Leckie powered through to beat Kasper Schmeichel, and the tables had turned. Much to the delight of Aussie fans watching in Melbourne. Disappointment for Denmark and a shock qualification for Australia, through for the first time in 16 years.
And in the US, a strike by railway workers that could potentially devastate the economy has been narrowly averted. US lawmakers have signed off on a bill which binds companies and workers to an agreement. It was brokered months ago by the Biden administration and it now heads to the Senate. CNN's Phil Mattingly has more.
The joint resolution is passed.
A bipartisan vote that marked a critical step in a furious effort to prevent economic disaster.
Today, we are here to safeguard the financial security of America's families, to protect American economy as it continues to recover, and avert a devastating nationwide rail shutdown.
For President Biden, a crucial win in the behind-the-scenes effort to avert rail worker strikes that could cripple U.S. commerce. The White House locking in 79 Republicans in support of the bill, a window into a complex problem cutting across political and ideological lines.
The middle class built America, and unions built the middle class.
One that has pitted the White House and Democratic leaders against their close allies in the labor movement.
Now we're at a place where the president has been very clear that we have to avert a rail shutdown, and he's asking Congress to act.
And major business groups lining up behind the administration in support. The fear of economic collapse trumping long-standing allegiances after several unions rejected a deal the White House helped drive in September, primarily due to the agreement's omission of paid sick leave.
Now it's going to come here to the Senate.
White House officials now keenly aware their most acute challenge lies ahead.
Do we stand with workers in the rail industry and say, yes, you are right. Working conditions are horrendous. We cannot continue a process by which you have zero paid sick leave.
The House voting to pass a separate bill to include paid sick leave, as Senator Bernie Sanders pledged his own effort in a fiery floor speech. Biden's set to dispatch his top two cabinet officials, Labor Secretary Marty Walsh and Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, to meet behind closed doors with Senate Democrats on Thursday. A meeting, White House officials say, will focus on an agreement they say includes clear wins for union workers, including the largest pay increases in more than 5 decades. Democratic sources say they're cautiously optimistic Biden will get the votes, putting the president on the precipice of another win driven by compromise, even in the face of pressure from close allies.
All kidding aside, we're here to get work done.
Biden resolving a Democratic deadlock on cornerstone economic and climate legislation this summer. The same month, he clinched a sweeping bipartisan manufacturing law that sits at the core of his economic strategy.
This will ensure tens of thousands of new construction jobs.
And his post-midterm election travel around the country, with a stop in Michigan on Tuesday.
For the first time in a long time, we're investing in America and we're investing in ourselves.
Ahead of a scheduled visit to Arizona next week.
It is 18 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Some more of your feedback now on the issue of the report into Malachi Subecz's death and how the agencies dealt with his case. A lot of you getting in touch about mandatory reporting. This is one of the recommendations, obviously. This person says, yes, of course it should be mandatory. There is a legal protocol to follow. If allegations are false or if there are other abuses going on like neglect or failure to support and protect economically, for example, these are crimes too. So the system needs proper funding and representation for those involved. Nancy's got in touch to say it's appalling what happened to that innocent little boy and how many systems and people let him down. But can I just say that no social worker going into that role would want such an awful outcome. They'll be dealing with this death forever too. I wouldn't want that possibility to be an unintended outcome of my job. Social workers probably need more support. No one involved comes out of this well. On the subject of Auckland Transport and their interesting announcement, they had a new CEO lined up, was an international candidate. They thought that person was coming over for the job, and now the election happened, local body election happened, and they don't want the job anymore. Mike from Auckland's got in touch with his reckons about what could be going on behind the scenes. Words have consequences. Wayne Brown's irresponsible campaign and post-election rhetoric loses AT an international quality leader. And by some accounts, government interest in co-funding several Tamaki Makaurau infrastructure problems. Way to go, Wayne, says Mike in Auckland. People in southern China have clashed with police overnight in the latest protest against the country's strict COVID rules. Footage shows police in hazmat suits holding riot shields to protect themselves from debris and glass being thrown at them. Meanwhile, China's former leader, Jiang Zemin, who came into power after the Tiananmen Square protests, has died at 96. His death comes as the country sees some of its most serious demonstrations since Tiananmen Square. The BBC's Stephen McDonald reports.
Jiang Zemin will be remembered as China's leader when his country rejoined the global community, a time of opening up and high-speed growth. He was also known as a power broker, economic reformer and something of an eccentric. After the bloody 1989 crackdown on protesters in and around Tiananmen Square, China was ostracised internationally. In the aftermath, Jiang Zemin was chosen as a compromise leader in the hope he'd unify hardliners and more liberal elements. He prioritised market forces, giving China the highest level of per capita growth of any major country. But political reforms were put to one side, and he's been criticised for the mass detention of Falun Gong practitioners who were seen as a threat to the party. He was at the helm for the Hong Kong handover when China joined the World Trade Organization and when it was awarded the 2008 Summer Olympics. Whether it be playing ping pong, singing or showing off his Hawaiian guitar skills, Jiang Zemin was a showman, in sharp contrast to the leaders who followed him.
Excited. Too simple. Sometimes
He famously gave Hong Kong journalists a public dressing down in English. And his images have become GIFs and emojis, still flying around Chinese social media, with a mixture of affection and hilarity.
If you agree,
At a press conference with former US President Bill Clinton, there was debating and light-hearted banter. It's hard to imagine this happening now.
Dictatorship.
CBS News asked if he was running a developmental dictatorship.
Am I wrong? Of course. This is big mistake. Big mistake, of course.
In his elderly years, there was still talk of him retaining a factional power base, as he survived rumour after rumour that he'd passed away. Yet his final public appearance in 2019 showed that even Jiang Zemin had to slow down sometime.
Fijians head to the polls in 2 weeks' time with former coup leaders, military men and long-time politicians all running for the top job. And in a bid to win over younger voters, most of them have taken to, dancing and performing on TikTok. Young voters matter in Fiji. More than 60% of the Pacific nation's population is under the age of 35. The ABC's Jordan Fennell reports.
Someone asked me the other day, do you ever lift, bro?
It's a new side of a familiar face. Former Fijian Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka is a 74-year-old veteran of the Pacific nation's politics, having instigated a military coup in the 1980s. Now, in a bid to win over voters again, he talks to camera while wiping the sweat off his face after finishing a workout.
And I said, yes, I used to, but now I'm more interested in lifting the standard of this country.
Since Rabuka joined TikTok a week ago, his videos have been watched more than 500,000 times. His most popular video is a skit of him shopping for fabric in a store as an Indo-Fijian shop assistant approaches him with a question.
If me and people like me vote for you now, will we be okay?
In 1987, Rabuka led an ethno-nationalistic coup and overthrew the then Indo-Fijian-dominated government, leading to an exodus of non-Indigenous Fijians from the country. Pacific digital researcher Jope Tarai says Rabuka's new TikTok presence is about putting that past behind him.
And so he's responding to that by seeking to assure those that were born within the millennium that we're in now, that they are safe and that they are secure.
With some, the approach seems to be working. 19-year-old Indo-Fijian university student Al-Sheikh Ashad Ali is a first-time voter.
You can see videos at the comfort of your house, and then you can decide who is the best alternative for you to vote for.
The youth vote is a key target for Fijian politicians, with people under the age of 35 making up more than 60% of the population. Researcher Jope Tarai says turnout is the key hurdle.
We have to speak their language.
And on TikTok, that language is dance. Another video shows Fiji's Labour Party leader Mahendra Chaudhry in an office surrounded by a group of dancers.
I'd like to take my message to the youth. They have a lot of problems here which need to be attended to. So we need to reach out to them.
A week after his opponents joined the platform, the incumbent Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama signed up too, albeit with a different approach.
I'm not here to dance. Leadership is serious business.
But it's not clear that particular tactic will resonate. Jope Tarai says for a political message to be successful on TikTok, it has to be tailored to the site.
The platform is about entertainment. If you don't agree with me, at least you can give me the space to listen to me for a few seconds. If you're not going to vote for me, at least you can sort of enjoy this moment with me.
Fiji's general election will be held on the 14th of December.
The late Queen's Lady-in-Waiting, Lady Susan Hussey, has apologised and resigned from her royal role after she repeatedly asked a black British charity boss where she was really from. The woman said she was totally stunned by Prince William's godmother's comments. Buckingham Palace has described the remarks as unacceptable and deeply regrettable. The BBC's Nicholas Witchell reports.
Buckingham Palace yesterday afternoon, a reception to highlight the issue of violence against women hosted by the Queen Consort. Standing next to Camilla was Ngozi Fulani. She's chief executive of Sister Space and a prominent advocate for survivors of domestic abuse. Also at the reception was Lady Susan Hussey. She was a lady-in-waiting to the late Queen Elizabeth for more than 60 years and is a senior member of the royal household. According to Miss Fulani, the following conversation took place between the two women. Lady Susan Hussey, where are you from? Miss Fulani, Sister Space. No, where do you come from? We're based in Hackney. No, what part of Africa are you from? I don't know. They didn't leave any records. Lady Hussey went on. No, but what nationality are you? I am born here and am British. No, but where do you really come from? Where do your people come from? My people, lady. What is this? Lady Hussey, oh, I can see I'm going to have a challenge getting you to say where you're from. When did you first come here? Miss Fulani, lady, I am a British national. My parents came here in the 50s. Oh, I knew we'd get there in the end. You're Caribbean. No, lady, I am of African heritage, Caribbean descent and British nationality. Another guest at the reception heard the exchange.
It made us feel like perhaps we're not welcome, perhaps we don't belong here. And you can be pretty sure that a white woman wouldn't have been on the receiving end of a line of questioning like that.
Buckingham Palace said it took the whole incident extremely seriously. It went on, in this instance, unacceptable and deeply regrettable comments have been made. The individual concerned would like to express her profound apologies for the hurt caused and has stepped aside from her honorary role with immediate effect. Lady Susan Hussey has given years of devoted service to the royal family. She's godmother to Prince William. She's said nothing further about the incident. Ngozi Fulani has accused Buckingham Palace of being institutionally racist. And into this tonight have stepped the Prince and Princess of Wales. They've just arrived on a BA flight into Boston. William's spokesman has said racism has no place in British society, and it was right that Lady Hussey had stepped aside. It all amounts to an uncomfortable reminder at the start of William and Catherine's US visit of the comments about racist attitudes by the Duchess of Sussex.
That's about all we've got time for this evening. Before we head off, Alan's got in touch and says, I've sat in slow-moving traffic for around 30 minutes with drivers around me constantly on their phones. Does this concern anyone but me? Alan, did you text me that message? And were you in your car at the time? Maybe that's concerning too. The Late News team's going to keep you updated throughout the evening. If you missed anything, check us out on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. The son of a slain dairy owner speaks to First Up about tougher penalties for offenders and how the death of Janak Patel has seen history repeating itself. Tune in, 5 a.m.
Good evening, RNZ News headlines. The Minister of Sport, Grant Robertson, says the country has lost a true sporting icon with the death of Sir Murray Halberg. Children's Minister Kelvin Davis has acknowledged 5-year-old Malachi Subecz would probably still be alive if Oranga Tamariki staff and other agencies had done their jobs properly. Dairy owners are being offered a free trial for a so-called wearable silent alarm that could minimise the wait for police in the event of a robbery. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
The future of drug policy in New Zealand.
I think the law is, as many people have said, is out of date, but I don't think we have a social licence to make a radical change to the law.
Society needs to send a clear message that drugs are very harmful. They cause mayhem.
Illicit substances can cause harm, as Paul is saying, but if we're going to be adults, we have to have the discussion about those drugs have not managed to disappear by virtue of us continuing to ratchet up penalties associated to their use.
Class A debate. Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Nisa Mbulavinaka, kia ora, you're listening to Trending Now. I'm Marama Tipole. Coming up, we'll have the detail, but right now, Field Days is one of the most reliable events on the agricultural calendar, making a splash in June almost every year of its half-century history. The 4-day event, which runs until Saturday at Mystery Creek near Hamilton, is the largest agricultural gathering of its kind in the Southern Hemisphere. 2022, however, joins 1970 as the only 2 years Field Days has been delayed. It will have kicked off yesterday and the community is buzzing. Chief Executive Peter Nation spoke to Corandan on Morning Report.
Yeah, it's pretty good, although we've had a bit of rain in the last few weeks, so which isn't a bad thing. It keeps the dust down. The temperatures are averaging pretty good, so I mean it's starting to feel like summer. And for a lot of people that have been to field days over the years, you know, in June it's normally dark, but cold and a bit of fog. Well, we're not going to have much of that this year.
Indeed. Now, in terms of the mood of farmers, and they often, you know, we hear of tractors being bought and all this sort of thing. What is the approach this year? Because on the one hand, commodity prices have been good. There will be some money. There is. The economy's been growing. But on the other hand, you're being told by the Reserve Bank Governor not to spend. So what's going to be the approach?
Yeah, I think field days achieves a lot of things for a lot of people. And in the farming community, I mean, sales will be what they are. There'll be people either having to replace equipment or thinking about it. And some of those bigger end purchases aren't done on the spur of the moment. And, you know, we know there's a lot of headwinds in front of us. There always seems to be some challenges in the market. But for a lot of people, they also see it as a time to get off farm and come and talk to their professionals or advisors about some of those challenges and work them through. So I guess as an event, it creates a lot of things for a lot of people, but one of the big things is connectedness, coming together, other fellow farmers, agencies that support them like Feds and MPI and all those organisations. So it creates a lot of opportunities for people to actually come and have a chat and get some things off their chest or solve some issues.
Yeah, I mean, farmers are feeling a bit under the pump in terms of a raft of new measures around the environment, water, and obviously climate change. Can we expect there to be a focus, or should there be a focus at field days around ways in which to improve the environmental performance of farms? So are we seeing an increased focus on technologies, on ways in which to improve farm practice?
Yeah, Field Days is definitely an event for that. It has been for a long, long time. So, you know, one of the things in New Zealand agriculture and New Zealand agritech is that we're very good at putting our minds to challenges and solving them. Some of those things take longer than others, but we're seeing, you know, another good, strong number of entries in the innovations area and actually quite a focus on climate change, sustainability, products that are trying to solve some issues. And then we've got a number of exhibitors here that are also, you know, an early stage of manufacture or distribution or exporting that are actually displaying their wares as well. So we've seen this through the ages of an event like this, and that's why we've got to focus on things like innovation.
Any regenerative farming on display?
I couldn't actually be factually correct on that, but I suspect there is some stuff in there around that.
And just finally, I mean, I'm sure there'll be some politicians who will wander through at some point. They usually do, including the Prime Minister. I'm not sure whether it's on her calendar or not. Probably is. Do you think they could be in for a frosty reception, given the way farmers have been feeling and certainly expressing themselves through the likes of Federated Farmers and the slightly more, I don't know if extreme's the right word, group groundswell?
I think politicians see this as an event of national significance with a big cross-population of both urban and rural. So we get politicians coming from all parties, all colours, coming here and actually mixing with the general public, and that allows the general public to have a discussion with them on the street or on a site or whatever, and that's the beauty of Field Day.
And that was a kōrero that was from yesterday morning on Morning Report. And actually I had a wee look on the Field Days Facebook page. There's also an app even. And I hear that tractor racing is a must-see experience. So tractor racing experience between two entrants racing against the timer. It runs all day starting from 8 a.m. Well, now it is time for the detail. If you're arrested or detained overseas, who do you call for help back home? And can they really help you?
Kia ora, I'm Sarah Robson, and today on The Detail, The Kiwi couple trapped in Iran for months say they're extremely relieved to be back with family after a tough 15 weeks.
We begin tonight in Bali, from where reports say a young New Zealander has been arrested and charged with drugs offences under Indonesia's controversially severe drug laws.
Well, she was a sensible, successful woman who found love online with a handsome stranger. She flew halfway around the world to meet him, only to be arrested and jailed for carrying 5 kilos of cocaine.
What happens when a New Zealander gets into serious trouble overseas?
That I had no intention to be part of a drug trafficking organisation, and if I had known that there were drugs in my bag, I would have gone to the police.
I looked into the judge's eyes for the first time. I remember right about that time that I knew I was in trouble.
Is there anything diplomats can do to help?
When you are travelling, you don't travel within the framework of New Zealand law. You travel in the framework of the law and conventions of the country you're travelling.
And just how much is at stake?
Most people detained overseas are subject to arbitrary decision-making and detention, that the rules go out the door.
Figures from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade show there are about 60 New Zealanders who are either in prison or being held captive overseas. 13 are detained in China. There are 12 in prison in the United States. Others are being held in places like Indonesia, Thailand, the United Kingdom and Singapore. Many have committed drug or fraud offences. Some have been jailed for murder. Craig Tuck is a Tauranga-based lawyer who specialises in transnational crime.
In a situation where somebody is detained overseas and has been charged, generally speaking, there would be multiple jurisdictions involved. It's very much a developing area of law as the borderless society, I guess, of what we now deal with internationally.
How much of your work each week is dealing with those overseas jurisdictions versus what we may consider sort of more run-of-the-mill New Zealand-centric work?
So prior to the lockdown, 1 week a month, I would be overseas dealing with cases and people detained overseas. Through the COVID period, everything just really did go on hold, and most of that work now is starting to kick off again with people that have been detained for some period now needing assistance, and the travel and the security forces essentially, and the information that they've got is being acted upon. So I would say 25% of my workload would be engaged in transnational criminal justice issues one way or another.
So what practically happens when you get a call from a New Zealander who is detained in an overseas jail?